Hi, how you doing? Justin here. Welcome to IM-144, in which we're going to be checking out string bending. Now, string bending is a very, very cool technique used a lot in rock and blues, but it's unfortunately an electric guitar technique. Those of you that only have an acoustic guitar, please feel free to watch the video and maybe have a go at it, but you'll probably find it very difficult, and I don't want you kind of hurting your hands, so maybe you might want to leave this one until you've got yourself an electric guitar. The most important thing when you learn string bending is making sure that you get your technique right. Many people start trying to learn to do string bending by using their fingers, and it just doesn't work. You really have to use your wrist and your arm. So let's get to a close-up, and I'm going to show you exactly how to perform this technique. The first note we're going to be bending is the note D. So I'd like you to start by putting your third finger down in the 7th fret of the 3rd string. Now, the first rule of string bending is that you always use more than one finger where possible. So your 3rd finger is down here, that's the one going to be doing the string bending. So we're going to support that one with the 2nd finger back behind in the 6th fret. It doesn't really matter where in the fret it goes, it can go right up next to the fret. Even if it's snuck into the 7th, it wouldn't be too bad, but try and keep it back in the 6th fret if you can. Now, the second rule is that you're going to be using your hand and arm and not your fingers. Now, this is really important. It's probably the most common mistake that people make when they're learning to do string bending. So what you're not going to do is keep your fingers square to the frets and try and push up like this. It's really difficult to hold, difficult to control, and it generally just sucks. You're not going to do that. The whole idea here, what you should be doing is using your wrist to create the bend here. You can see that my fingers now are kind of locked, and that I'm using the motion of my arm and my wrist to push the string up. And this is the motion. Now, what you most likely find is it's pretty awkward to start off with, to try and get this wrist thing going on. And for a little while you'll be struggling and you'll be going like this, and it'll be your fingers and you're trying to figure it out and you grip it all funny. But then one day you'll do it and it'll be really easy. And when you get that one and it's really easy, you'll know that you're doing it right, because it's always that feeling. Now, probably the easiest way to think of it is that if you hold your hand out, you can see my fingers are now pointing toward the camera. If I just now kind of press my palm up against the neck, like kind of pivoting, it's pivoting here with the edge of the first finger actually touching on the neck. And when you're doing your string bending, you will find that that part of your finger there, right where it joins the hand, will be actually touching the guitar neck, because that's your pivot point. Now you can see if I kind of fold my hands in, I'm doing like a little kind of L shape there with my hand and put it in the same place. If I make the same movement, you can see the fingers are now kind of pushing across the strings. Now, of course, it doesn't really look like that when you're doing bending, but that's just to give you the idea of it levering against here, against that part of the guitar neck. That's the movement that you're after. And you'll find that when you get that, bending becomes really simple. So let's go back, put your 3rd finger and your 2nd finger in the 7th fret and the 6th fret respectively, and have a go at pushing up. You might even want to put your 1st finger down in the 5th fret as well, but see if you can get that feeling of your arm doing it. The fingers, you can see, are locked in place. They're not moving at all. They're solid. You know, it wouldn't matter how I move it, they're going to stay the same. And once on the guitar neck, that's how they move. It's this motion here. Does take a little bit of practice. Don't fret if you don't get it right away. That's the motion. Just see if you can keep doing that kind of thing. And when you find it getting easy, you'll probably know that you're doing it right. Now, the next really important rule, number 3, is that you know where you're bending to, because with string bending, it's possible to play really horrible out of tune notes. So what we're going to start off doing is learning a little exercise to help you get your bends in tune. So what we're going to start off with is we're going to play this note here at the 7th fret of the 3rd string with our 3rd finger. Then we're going to move our hand up 1 fret and play the 8th fret of the same string. Then we're going to move back to the 7th fret, play it again, and then try and bend it to the sound, to the pitch of that note at the 8th fret. So again, we go 7th fret, 8th fret, 7th fret, bend. Now, don't be putting any vibrato on yet. That's really important. Just try and get your bend to the accurate pitch. It should feel quite easy. It's only a semitone bend. You could probably do it with your fingers the wrong way and get away with it, but it should feel super duper easy if you're getting the technique right. So again, 7th fret, 8th fret, 7th fret, bend. So it's a little 4-note sequence. Now, you want to practice that a little bit first. This is called a semitone bend because we're just bending 1 fret. But we can also bend a whole tone, which is 2 frets, in which case we play the 7th fret, 9th fret, back to 7th, and bend a tone. Like I said, absolutely no vibrato. Make sure that you get the bend really nicely in tune. Now once you feel comfortable with that, the semitone and a tone, then you might like to try it on the 2nd string. Same frets is totally fine. And then a tone. And then finally on the thinner string. And a tone. Some of you may have noticed that all of the bends I was doing were going up and you never heard them come down. And the reason for that is because I was muting all of the strings with my picking hand. So as soon as I've performed the bend, the picking hand touches the strings, then I release the bend. That way you avoid the kind of seagull effect that it kind of sometimes can sound cool, but most of the time it's not really desirable. So try and get into the habit of when you're doing your bending practice and you go with this hand, mute, relax the bend, you can then move to the next note. Here, touches the strings. It's just the outside of the palm there is the bit that does the string dampening, just to make sure that that note, stop, relax. Otherwise you get, and that often that just doesn't really sound cool. It can be used to good effect later on, but it's not probably something that you'd want to start off learning. Make sure you get that, palm mute thing going, because it really will make your bend sound a lot better. Now, as well as getting your technique right, the other really important thing is making sure that you bend the right notes. So what I want to do now is go through the minor pentatonic scale and that blues hybrid scale and show you which are the cool notes to bend and why. So we're just going to be looking at the thinnest 3 strings because they're the ones that we most commonly bend on. It is possible to bend on these thicker ones, but it's kind of not what you want to start off with really. So starting off here, the A minor pentatonic scale on the thinnest 3 strings at the 5th fret. Now, if we look at this top note here that we were playing, this is the note C. And regularly you probably find that you're playing that with your little finger. But with string bending, we never ever do it with our little finger. There's a couple of exceptions, but 99% of guitar players bend with the 3rd finger. It's a lot stronger. Little finger's too short and too weak and doesn't give you a good bend. So get into the habit of using your 3rd finger for the bend, even if it means that you have to re-finger the scale. But you've already learned it's not important what fingers play the notes for the scale, right? So we can use 3rd finger for all of those notes. If you don't believe me, check out Eric Clapton. Watch some videos of guitar players you like and notice that they 9 times out of 10, well, 99 times out of 100, they'll be using their third finger for the bend. Now, this top note here, this note can be bent one tone, which is 2 frets. Now, we haven't done the next scale pattern, but this note D is the next note in the A minor pentatonic scale if we start moving up the neck there. So that's why this note must be bent a tone. Bending a semitone to here, this isn't a good scale note and it'll just tend to sound sour. So if you're going to bend the 8th fret, make sure you bend it one tone. Worth practicing? Now, also on the thinnest string, you'll remember from our hybrid scale, we've got here the 7th fret. Now, the next note up in the scale was the 8th fret. So what you want to practice on off the 7th fret is a semitone bend, a one-step bend. You'd practice. So from the 8th fret, it should be a tone. And from the 7th fret, it should be a semitone. Now, exactly the same happens on the 2nd string. So this note here, the note G, bends up a tone, which is the same as that note, actually. So we've got a tone off the 8th fret. And then we've got a semitone off the 7th fret, because it's bending to that note. And it's exactly the same on the 3rd string. On the 3rd string, it's ever so slightly different. On the 7th fret, we can bend a tone, because it bends to this note, which is the note E. You can hear it's the same note, E. You can even play them both at the same time if you like. So it's important that from the 7th fret here on the 3rd string, you can bend a tone. The difference is you can also bend a semitone, because you've got the blue. So here from the 7th fret you can bend a tone or a semitone. So you should practice a tone or a semitone. Now, what I would recommend that you start doing is exploring all of those bends when you improvise. If you put a backing track on, just start to experiment with all of those different things. You've got the big, lots of fun. Practicing your bending technique and making sure that you got the technique exactly right is very important. But also very important is listening to the original blues masters do their string bending so you know what it is that your string bending should sound like. Now, probably my favourite string bender of all time is Albert King. He's got a wonderful string bend. He does them really slow, really fast, lots of vibrato, no vibrato. So if you've not got any Albert King, I'd highly recommend that you get either his album King Albert or Born Under a Bad Sign. Both of those albums have got loads and loads of fantastic guitar playing, and is a really good source of getting traditional blues licks and listening to what really good string bending sounds like. So the first thing that you should be doing is practicing the exercise. So playing a note, playing it a semitone higher, back, and then doing the bend. That's to really help make sure that you get your pitching good, that you're bending in tune. And a tone. So practice that on all 3 of the thinnest strings. That's exercise 1. It's really, really important, and it's one that you should do for a little while until you feel totally confident that you've got your bending in tune. Once you've conquered that, the next really important thing is to actually put it into practice. So putting a backing track on and just jamming along and experimenting with your string bending. You'll find that it brings a whole life to your guitar playing that you might not have discovered before. So when you're improvising, it just gives, I don't know, it seems to be really expressive or something. There's something magical about string bending once you get it, but it doesn't really have that kind of magic feeling until you've got the technique right, I've got to say. So plenty of practice on the technique, then plenty of practice using it, and I'll see you for another lesson sometime real soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.